And welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I am Charlie Burris. That is Zach Reagan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you for listening to us. We talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. If you want to listen to that on the regular, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple and Spotify. When you get there, rate, review, but you gotta subscribe because then you won't miss our shows when we drop them on Mondays. And speaking of Mondays, it is not one right now, and that is because we waited until they released the playoff rankings to do this show because I wanted to be able to speak to exactly what this playoff committee did to Tennessee and where exactly we sit and what's going on. And so it's Tuesday at 8 p.m. We might do that next week too. I don't know. It's going to be a game time decision. But typically, it is Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and that is when you can go over to YouTube, the A to Z Sports Tennessee Volunteers YouTube channel. Go subscribe there, and you can hop in with us and hang out when we're live. And if you hit the notification bell on YouTube, you'll be notified when we go live, so you won't miss it no matter when we do it. It's so great. At A to Z Sports, at Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT on the socials. Facebook.com for A to Z Sports Natural. And A to Z Sports.com for everything that Zach is writing on the internet. All right. Tennessee goes to Athens, Georgia. And Zach, you predicted that Tennessee would lose. You were a total downer, and it made me sad. And you were exactly right. you pretty much nailed it, sadly.
Yeah, the reverse jinx didn't work out as planned.
Dang it. I mean, realistically, we're clearly on tonight's show. We're going to go into what happened in the Georgia game briefly, and then we're going to talk about everything that happened with the playoff rankings just a few minutes ago. Realistically, the chance of Tennessee winning was fairly slim, although I chose Tennessee to win prior to the game. I genuinely thought they could, and I will say this, for 20 minutes at the beginning of that game, I was like, oh, are we about to walk into Athens and kick these guys' teeth in? Is that what is about to happen here? But it wasn't meant to be. But like I said, we're going to talk about it all. That's going to be the thrust of tonight's show. I usually like to do a little more intro, but let's go ahead and just get to it, Zach. Get down to business. Right after I tell you about Farm Bureau health plans. Farm Bureau has been serving Tennesseans for over 75 years. Much has changed in Tennessee over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. Plan on Farm Bureau health plans for health, dental, and vision for better coverage, better rates, and better service. Go to fbhp.com/ATOZ or walk into one of their 200 plus locations across the state. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ. Farm Bureau health plans. Go get yourself a health plan. Our longtime sponsor. Like I said, let's just get to it, Zach, because I want to talk about this playoff nonsense, and it's a lot. It's all just a lot. Tennessee in Athens hops out to a 10-0 lead. And like I said, I kind of had this thought initially where I was like, oh, this is really going to happen. Carson Beck comes out and starts that game really poorly. What was he like? 3 of 7 initially, just like really kind of off. And Tennessee puts them in a 3-and-out on their first drive. They flip around, score a touchdown, get a field goal. Boo Carter has a huge punt return that it should have gone for a touchdown, but he got tackled by the punter. Maybe that should have been a sign that he got tackled by the punter. I don't know. But after that, Georgia goes on a 31-7 run and bullies Tennessee. Frankly, obviously, myself, former Vols quarterback Jonathan Crompton hashed this out during the post-game show that we do here on the same channel. But
What did you think of this one, Zach?
Man, my first thought, and I thought this Saturday night late, and it still feels this way a couple days later. It feels a lot like that Alabama game in Tuscaloosa last season, where
Yes,
you started well, you felt pretty good, and in the second half, you couldn't get anything going. Things weren't going your way. Like nothing really went Tennessee's way. It's a shame because Tennessee at their best was that first quarter. I mean, they go down the field that first drive after they stop Georgia, and you go down the field and score on a fullback touchdown. Like, great. I mean, we're all excited about the play calling at this point. It looks dynamic. They marched down the field. You felt great, but you knew inside you're like, Georgia's going to punch back. Like, this isn't going to be a blowout win, especially in Athens. So I mean, you never felt good, even when they got up 10-0, I guess, at one point. That Boo Carter punt was definitely Austin Stanley, one of the creators of A to Z Sports, was texting us that night. It's like that's kind of when it felt like the momentum really shifted, because if Boo Carter, if Jalen McMurray failed to make a block, Boo Carter probably in the moment could have done a little more to get by the punter. Maybe you kind of go inside, jump the guy. I don't know. It felt like Boo Carter could have out-athleted him in that moment, but it's a bang play type deal coming on or happening there, and the block doesn't get made. You have to settle for a field goal on that drive. It was a field goal, right? Like I think they added the field goal there.
Yes, I think
it might have been the long Max Gilbert one, and that really kind of kept the moment, the game from not really getting away from Georgia. But you get out 14-0 there with that punt return, put their offense back on the field. Your defense is kind of feeling it. Who knows where things go from there. That was definitely a turning point. And then you get into that second half, and I know the officiating has been a huge topic. We were beside ourselves at times on Saturday night, and there's still several plays that don't make a lot of sense. And it's mainly that first Georgia drive in the third quarter. I felt like that drive, if it's officiated, I don't even want to say correctly, because some of that stuff is like, the face mask call I get is tough. You go down, you see a guy tackled, the helmet comes off, the hands near the opening, maybe shouldn't have been a face mask, but in the moment you can tell that it was. Why is that not reviewable? I don't know. And then that would have been, I think, like a 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 something situation. Is they've been 2nd and 24. They kind of had a big play, maybe 39. I can't remember. It gives them an automatic first down, and then you still later on have a chance to maybe hold them to a field goal, and then the legal substitution or the 12 men on the field penalty that we're still debating several days later, that I will never ever agree with. There's so many examples of what Tennessee did happening that we've looked at, that we've pulled up. Kirby Smart himself said that his team does it, and I think we all know what happened in that moment. I sent a tweet out earlier comparing college football to travel baseball. If you're in that world, it is very much, that's what it is, right? Like coaches stealing talent, bad officiating. It's also, I think, if you have a kid in travel sports, you've been in these situations where you go to a tournament and the home team at that tournament, whoever's hosting, maybe you're playing them. It's like, man, every call is going their way. Like, it just feels that way. And it's like they're close calls, but it's like they're getting all of them. That's what it felt like at times playing in Athens in that game. And that penalty was, like, I believe 100% that Kirby Smart politicked for that to happen. He had pointed it out. He was waiting for that particular situation to come up. And I think that's why he waited a little later in the play clock to substitute in that situation. Because Kirby's not dumb. Like, he's won a couple national championships.
Yeah.
We can talk crap about him all we want, but he's obviously an elite coach. He knew what he was doing in that situation, and it worked. Like, if I'm on the Georgia side, I'm smiling and I'm loving it. If Josh Heupel does that, we're smiling and loving it, and like, hey, just be better, type deal. But that's definitely what happened, and it worked in Georgia's favor there. Gave them a 2nd and 2 instead of a 3rd and 7. Obviously, Georgia scores on that drive, and it's just downhill from there. It felt like all the momentum went in their favor. And it wasn't just the officiating. I mean, Georgia won the battle in the trenches on both sides, and that ultimately was the biggest reason why Georgia won that game. And it was disappointing to see, as good as the defensive line has been this season.
I definitely get the comparison with the Alabama game. I would say Tennessee wasn't, despite the score and despite the fact that you didn't score in the second half exactly like that Alabama game last year, I don't think Tennessee was nearly as impotent in that second half as they were in that Alabama game. I mean, that Alabama game was just like you were up by 13 points at the half in that Alabama game, and then you lost by 20, or I don't remember exactly what happened there. It was some
I don't think they scored in the second
that.
half of that game.
Yeah, they did not. They did not. You were up by 13, and then you ended up not scoring at all, losing by a ton. It wasn't as impotent as that Alabama game. I'll push back on that a little because you had the drive to tie things up at 24. And to me, that drive was the story of the game. Your defense, it was just not happening for your defense that night. And I almost feel like that game was coming. Your defense is just not going to be A+ all the way across the board every single time out, and they can't save your butt in every single scenario. Like, that's just what has happened all season. And eventually, I don't know that I expected them to be as bad as they were, where you literally didn't sack Carson Beck one time.
No pressure. Like, he was not even he wasn't even getting hit after
clean jersey.
Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, nothing at all. I didn't expect it to be that bad. But eventually, I was like, okay, you're going to give up more than 20 points at some point. That's probably going to happen. They got close to that not ever happening. You know, there's only 2 games left in the season now, but still, it wasn't necessarily that the defense had finally had an off game, but it was that drive where you were, I think, if I'm thinking of the timeline correctly, you're trying to tie it at 24 after they took the lead, and it was something like 12 plays, 6.5 minutes, and you only went 35 yards, and then you punt the ball.
Yeah, that's
the game right there, where just the offense was like kind of working. I would say it's definitely one of Nico's best games that he had in a general sense. I thought he was composed, made nice throws, did extended plays with his feet. He was quicker to react to pressure, and just, he's continuing to feel out SEC football even more. But that, in a nutshell, is just, it's Josh Heupel. If it's not going to be an explosive play, it's not happening, and the explosive plays, Dante Thornton, beautiful long pass, hits him right in the hands, and it's like there was a voodoo on him. Like, he just, like you have a scholarship to play wide receiver. We are literally, if you're counting NIL, you're being paid to do this. And I mean, it could not have been a better pass, and he just drops it. Like, to me, that's more it in a nutshell. You're closer to Georgia than you were a year ago, or especially the year before that. I think that's clear. That almost makes it hurt more, because I think this is probably as easy as it's ever going to be against Georgia, and it just so happened that you had to play him in Athens. I think you play him in Knoxville. They have to deal with the crowd noise. Beck is off his game like he has been in recent games. Like, the calculus is different. But just in this one, you don't touch Beck. He's back there putting his feet up on the ottoman, doing whatever he wants to, reading a book, just whatever, hanging out. I said to Crom, he's probably back there like writing a dissertation. I don't know. Like, he had all the time in the world, and that's kind of the result. You would have had to score 35 points to win that one, 32 technically, but in terms of the math, it would have been around 35 points to win, and that just was never going to happen. Having to dink and dunk like that, it just wasn't working. Georgia's defense played well, but you didn't even, some of the tough stuff, like, you didn't implode with offensive line penalties this time. Like, that happened in 22. 22 was brutal with false starts. And this one, you didn't even do that much. There was like a couple, and still you couldn't move the ball.
I mean, and the road thing gets mentioned. I saw in the comments a minute ago, Josh Heupel, issues on the road, and that has been a problem at times. But this season, I don't know. It's hard. It's easy to look at what's happened in last season in 2022 and come to that same conclusion. But I'm just not sure that's exactly what's happening here. I think this team has started improving on the road. You won that game at Oklahoma at night. The Arkansas game was a big, just kind of trap game that you overlooked, and you were still a play away from winning it. And this game in Athens, it definitely was much better than what we've seen from them in the past on the road. But right now, I think everyone in the SEC. I mean, Kirby Smart has been preaching it, Lane Kiffin as well, over the last several weeks. Like, there's nothing tougher than winning in the SEC on the road, especially at night. Like, it is insanely difficult. Both of Tennessee's losses have come at night on the road, and it's like the playoff committee is completely ignoring that. We'll get to that later. But I think, Georgia has lost 2 games on the road. It's difficult to go play in the SEC on the road, and combine that with the parity that we're seeing in the sport, and I think it's going to be like this every year. I'm not sure we're going to see really another dominant undefeated team, and if we do, it's not going to be super often. And then I think the other thing with Tennessee right now, we're 10 games into the season. I feel like we can have a pretty good, like, hey, this is a review of the season up until this point. Like, this is who they are right now. They can be explosive, but they haven't consistently done it. I think sitting here waiting for a 50-point game against a really good team to happen, it could happen, but I don't think that was a wise thing to hold out hope for. And really, I think it's the wide receivers to me. Like Nico, I've seen steady improvement from him throughout the season. He's gotten better and better and better. Like you said, he's more poised. He's making better decisions. He doesn't seem like he's panicking out there. He's still a redshirt freshman. He's going to have some times. He's still developing. He's going to be much better next year, and if he stays a year after that, even better. We'll see where it goes. But the wide receiver play, like Tennessee just does not have an elite wide receiver.
Nope.
2021, you had Velus Jones and Cedric Tillman combined for like 1,900 yards or something. And 22, you had Jalen Hyatt. He won the Biletnikoff Award. Last year, Squirrel played well, but he was 800 yards, and that's your leading receiver. In this offense, you're expecting at least 1,000-yard guy every season. They're not going to have that this year either. Thornton's the closest, and I think he's at like 500 and some yards. Unlikely he gets there at this point. They've got a bunch of like wide receiver 2s and 3s on their roster. They don't have that go-to guy. Like Squirrel's been good, but he's more of like a slot possession, not really possession, slot, move the chains type guy. He's going to go over the middle, catch 15-yard passes. Every now and then he's going to get loose for one of those vertical shots, which we've only seen once maybe from him this season. Brew's a prototypical possession receiver type guy, like an Anquan Bolden, who's just going to move the chains. Thornton's your deep threat, and you just don't have the guy that's out there making these contested catches, that's coming down with tough catches, that's coming up with these just, oh my goodness, how did he make that catch type of plays like we've seen some other teams have. And that's part of why Nico doesn't have better numbers. He doesn't have a guy that he trusts to just throw it up to. Chris Brazzell hasn't been really what we expected from him, the consistency there. You haven't seen Mike Matthews hardly at all. Like if they don't get better wide receiver play, it's going to be hard for this team to be explosive.
Heupel has to do one of two things with the current build of this team. He either has to next year bring in elite wide receivers, or Mike Matthews has to be that guy. Braylon Staley has to be that guy. Somebody has to be there. And we just maybe don't know it's them yet. I think Mike Matthews, a guy like that. Or you got to adjust. Like I've told you, Zach, and I think I've said it here on this show, like I'm not super comfortable like heavily critiquing play calling and things like that. Never been a football coach. At the end of the day, I'm more a basketball guy in terms of sports I actually played, like deeply. I know a ton about football, but I've never like been in a booth calling plays.
It's tough from the TV copy, right? Like a play doesn't work, and you don't really know why it didn't work sometimes.
Exactly. And I mean, there's really good. There's who's that? The Georgia fan guy that breaks down plays. I watch his videos a decent amount, and I love hearing a dude who's an expert at breaking down plays, but I can't do it myself. But I look at it. You either got to get those elite receivers, or you got to do something, because I'll lean on Crompton here, my co-host for the post game. I mean, Jonathan Crompton, a quarterback at Tennessee, and is a football coach himself. I mean, he hawks on constantly that you got to just be more creative since you don't have the athletes right now. You have Dylan Sampson, absolute dog, and he can carry you to a certain extent, but you have wide receivers that just can't get it done. So you got to do something. Like it can't just be, oh, we're going to just keep pounding our head against the wall with this same deal. And there was a couple wrinkles, like the the fullback at the goal line with Kitzelman, and how much they've run 12 personnel this year and some things like that. Like, they've done a few adaptive things, but at the end of the day, they're still just running the ball on second down every time, it feels like. And just, it's run, set up
It feels like
for the
their
deep
goal
shot.
is third and manageable. Like, that feels like
Yes.
they always want to make sure they're in third and manageable, which is
3rd and 5 is like where this team lives. How many that drive that I was referencing earlier, that was 12 plays, 6 minutes off the clock, and you went 30 yards and punted the ball, which is just brute. You're being brutal to yourself in that scenario, even though you had the ball and moved the ball a little bit. I mean, I feel like I'd have to go back and look at every single play there, but I feel like Tennessee got to like 3rd and 4 to 6 probably 3 times on that drive. Like, it seems like they almost do it on purpose. And I just look at it and go, what are we, what's it? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing, whatever whatever the saying is. Like, it just feels like that's what Heupel and Halsey are doing right now, where you just go, guys, this isn't working. Get something, an end around, hand the ball off to Squirrel in space. Throw the ball to Dylan Sampson, maybe.
I've always wondered why there's not more running back passing.
Yes,
Or why they're not more involved.
He's so Alvin Kamara-like, and Kamara is such a dynamic everything back, man. Like, he was so good when Butch finally threw him the football. Like, that just is kind of baffling me. I don't want to dwell on it too much because, like I said, I wanted this, half this show to be about the playoff. But
it is a conversation worth having, and I think it's Jacob Warren, that played at Tennessee from 2019, 2018 to last season, was on with Dave Hooker this week, and he was asked this question about the offense, and he kind of said a little bit the same thing. Like, it's on the coaches and the players to adapt because everybody is now adapting to Josh Heupel's offense.
Right.
It's out there more. More people are running it. Jeff Lebby at Mississippi State, Alex Stolish at USF. Like, it's branched off, and it was never a big secret anyway, right? Like, Art Briles has been running a variation of this at Baylor, a decade and a half ago. So there's a lot of it out there, and teams it's copycat. It's just like the NFL. It's going to be somewhat of a copycat deal and Kirby Smart said this last week before playing Tennessee. Like, he said, yeah, you go look at how other teams have played them and what's worked, and you try to incorporate some of that. So the way that teams are defending Tennessee now is different than the way they were defending them in 2021 and 2022. So you've got to find a way to now respond to what those defenses are doing and ways to beat that. Like, that's the only way that you're going to get more explosive. You combine that with some better wide receiver play, and I think you'll be okay. And I think Josh Heupel is smart enough guy to figure this out, but he's going to have to. I think he's probably been a little resistant to maybe evolving some, and maybe that's personnel. Who knows? I mean, that's a big undertaking to kind of work some of this stuff in, especially the way their offense works. But it does feel that way, that they're going to have to do something different here, just the way teams are playing them and defending them, because it's working to this point.
That was always, as much as I deeply despised Nick Saban at Alabama, the best thing he ever did was adapt constantly. Like, he was never just like, I'm going to run this defense-heavy team forever. No, he switched, and he started running.
That's why he went and got Lane.
We got Lane Kiffin, started running a spread offense. He was like, I'm not going to let you just beat me like this. What are you kidding me? And he went, and when he couldn't beat him anymore, he joined him.
Yep.
And so at a certain point, they are beating. Now, Georgia's the utmost example of somebody beating your offense because they can stop your run with a light box.
Yeah, and Kirby's
not many teams
can
do that.
Probably the top defensive mind in the sport right now, right? Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair to say.
Yes, I think so, and it showed in this game. Like I said, if it was in Neyland, maybe the calculus is a little bit different. I'm still not sure that you beat them, but it would have been closer, I think, and probably not as dominating of a second half there. But it was just tough to watch because you were up by double digits in this game. You had a 10-point lead at one point, and you ended up, a 31-7 run. It can't happen. Now, where does that leave us? Georgia moves up. They're back into the playoff, as was going to happen if Georgia beat you. And Tennessee now, as of the announcement tonight by the playoff committee, Tennessee is ranked number 11. And I saw a couple of people tweeting, and they're like, oh my gosh, Tennessee's still in the playoff. I wish. You are in the top 12. But thanks to the silly rules that include automatic qualifiers for a Boise State and the Big 12, which the Big 12, is there a bigger joke in football right now than the Big 12? Tennessee's out of the playoff because of this loss to Georgia. And we're going to have to talk about it, Zach. I will say before we do move on, was there anything else with the Georgia game you wanted to hit before we move on?
No, I mean, you just got to put it behind you, and you get another shot down there in a couple of years. It was just frustrating because that's the one thing that Josh Heupel hasn't been able to do. And this isn't Josh Heupel's great. Like I saw some, not that many, but you saw some negative tweets on Saturday about Heupel and Nico, and we're not that far removed from 5-7 seasons.
Yeah.
Like a lot of 5-7 seasons, a lot. And this isn't that. And this is what college football is now. I mean, it's happened really, really fast, the way the sport has evolved and gone to this tournament style deal with a lot of parity and players moving all over the place. It's very much like college basketball, where, college basketball team with 8 or 9 losses winning a championship used to be unheard of. And now it's not that. That wouldn't be that big of a surprise. It's just, you had a chance there to get past this team finally, and this is as beatable as Georgia. I mean, they're still really good. This is as beatable though as they've been since Heupel arrived. So, but Heupel still. I mean, look, what he's done over the last few years, especially with the situation he inherited, has been incredible. I think Nico has played really well, and I know he's getting paid a lot of NIL money to play quarterback at Tennessee, but no amount of NIL money expedites or speeds up the development process. You're still 20 years old. There are still things you have to go through that you have to see for the first time. And Tennessee, it's something I don't think a lot of people think about. Every team that plays Tennessee, like nobody's ever going to overlook Tennessee, especially with this Heupel offense. And it's not because it's the logo or anything like that. It's because of the style they play, the success they've had over the last few years. It's a unique game plan because teams play them different than they play anybody else on their schedule. It's what Kirby Smart said last week. And there's just a little bit of extra attention to detail. It feels like a little more focus every game week when you're playing Tennessee. They're getting teams' best shots because of that. And Nico is seeing things on film to prepare for these games, and then he's getting something completely different often when he goes out there and plays.
Yeah.
So that's a really hard thing to deal with. And I think he's done exceptionally well dealing with that. It's just another one of those things where not every situation's the same. You look at Florida and maybe like the way DJ Ladway's played at times, like what he's a true freshman and it's not a problem. Well, it's a completely different situation. It's not apples to oranges. It's completely different. So yeah, I think they've done really well. It's disappointing to lose to Georgia, but I don't think you should have any less faith in this coaching staff or these players.
No, ultimately, before the season ever started, I pretty much penciled this one in as a loss. When we finally got to the week before, I did think that this could be the one where Tennessee finally knocks them off in Athens, just because, as we've been saying, it's the most beatable that they've been. I still think that's true. I still think Tennessee played a respectable game. I also still think they're still not there yet. We've hawked on it a ton in probably the past year or more. It's all elite recruiting. You got to get more elite dudes in the door. And they, like for Tennessee's offensive line, which struggled in this game, David Sanders is coming in. Maybe Mike Matthews is that elite guy for your wide receivers. Yeah, there's hope there, but I think this game showed that it's not 100% there. So as tough as that is, again, the real story now is where does it leave us as far as the playoff goes? Because at the end of the day, that's really where, at least that's where my head is at. Okay, you lost Georgia. It's in the past. Let's see what happens here. So let's talk about it, Zach. What happened tonight with the playoff announcement? We'll talk about it right after I tell you about Zen Sports. It's never too early to start thinking about the big game, and this November, Zen Sports, the new sportsbook in Tennessee, has launched a brand new sweepstakes for its Tennessee customers, the Big Game Sweepstakes. You could win a grand prize of 2 tickets to Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans or $10,000 cash. But there's more. Zen Sports will award 50 additional prizes that include 2 tickets to any Tennessee sporting event or $100 cash. If you want in on the action, you can earn multiple entries every day just by betting on the Zen Sports app. For every bet you place, you'll earn 1 entry, and for every dollar you bet, you'll earn an additional entry. And if you like parlays, you'll earn double the entries on every parlay that you place. What are you waiting for? When you sign up for Zen Sports, you also get the $100 no danger first wager. If your bet loses, you'll be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $100. So start betting with Zen Sports today. Download that app. Zen Sports. Betting just got better. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. No danger first wager, limited to plus 500 odds to qualify. Terms and conditions apply. A qualifying wager for a wager entry must have minimum odds for any leg in that entry of at least minus 250 or worse. American odds. A wager of minus 251 does not qualify. Head to zensports.com/sweepstakes for all terms and conditions. You must be 21 or older in Tennessee to bet. So it is Tuesday night, Zach, and that means that the playoff rankings were announced. As I mentioned, we usually do our show on Mondays, but we waited till Tuesday to get the ranking announced because it is kind of what every Tennessee fan is watching. And here's a weird thing up front. I actually think, like, I don't know where I heard it, but in a couple places, people are like, oh, well, now that Tennessee lost to Georgia, now they miss out on the SEC championship game. Good. Let me say, weirdly, counterintuitively, I wish they would have beat Georgia, obviously, but the SEC championship game is stupid. And
Lane Kiffin agrees with you.
Yes. He was talking about it this week. I mean, it's dumb. It's something that's in the way now with the current playoff format. It's something because ultimately I think the sentiment has been that, oh, the loser of the SEC championship game, even if they end with 3 losses, they're not going to be left out. Says who? That's not a rule that's written into the college football playoff rules. That could absolutely happen. And you know when that did happen? Last year with Georgia, Georgia lost the SEC championship game and got booted out of the playoff. Who is to say that that's going to happen? That's a silly assumption.
And they were absolutely one of the best 4 teams in the country. Like,
yeah, they should have been in.
Objectively, if you're just looking at teams and you take their records out of it, like, this is one of the best teams, or even their record. I mean, they had 1 loss, but yeah, they were more than deserving of being a top 4 team last year.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's if you consider that a silver lining. I don't even know what you would consider, but it's sort of a funny element here. And I do think, I don't want to dwell on this too long, but I do think conference championships will probably go away. You're going to have to grapple with that. Or
a lot of money.
It's going to have to be grappled with because I think the SEC coaches will look around and go, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Especially if it's expanded.
If the coaches think that, then that's probably what it should be, right? Like, that's
exactly.
They're the ones in the trenches here having to fight these battles. I'm on board with it, by the way. I think it would be, but my ultimate thing is I think the playoffs should just expand. If this is going to be how it is, these debates are annoying. There's no way to settle them. We can argue for 12 hours about some of these resumes, and we're going to be at the same spot we were 12 hours before. It'd be a complete waste of time, especially as many people have said in the comments. This is just a snapshot of where things currently are. They don't really mean anything yet. Expand the playoff, do away with conference championship games, make the regular season 11 games again, do away with games against UMass and Mercer and UTEP in November. And you still got 16, 17 games to win a championship. And I don't know. I think it would be fun and a little less stressful for everyone. And seeding would still matter because you don't want to play on the road in a playoff.
It would just be even more like college basketball,
where
it sort of becomes, okay, the bare minimum for quote unquote a good season is to make the tournament, and then you go and see what happens. it was sometime in the last few weeks. I was listening to Josh Pate at where is he? 247 on 3?
CBS 24.
247, 247. Regardless, one of the biggest dudes in the game. And his take, honestly, I think it's a terrible take on his part. But he's like, oh, we should have stuck with the 4-team playoff because all of these people before the playoff was expanded argued, oh, well, these upstart teams will now get a chance to be in the playoff. And his argument was, no, what's actually going to happen is more SEC teams and more Big Ten teams are now just going to be in the playoff. And that's all that's going to happen. And that was his argument against it. And I went, that's exactly what I wanted. That's my, and I don't, apologies if I put any words in his mouth there, but that's sort of what I drew from it at least. And I was like, that I wanted to see the Big Ten, where you could get, like in this scenario where Indiana's played absolutely nobody, they're getting this high ranking. And then if they make it into the playoff and they have to go play in Tuscaloosa, I want to see them get their doors blown off and then go, we told you so. We told you. Or conversely, maybe they go to Tuscaloosa and they win. And it's an exciting proposition either way because somebody's getting proved right or wrong and it's all fun. We're all going to watch it. It's all going to have huge ratings. And I think anybody that's against that at this point, you're just being a troglodyte. Like just give it up. Give up the ghost. It's all moving forward. We're better to be ahead instead of behind. So regardless, that's a whole side conversation. I kind of went off the rails there. Playoff rankings were announced tonight. Tennessee is left out. They are ranked 11th, which is actually the top 12. But, of course, because BYU and Boise State, by the letter of the law, not because they're good, but because they have to be included, they are included. And so Tennessee is actually out. Both of those teams are actually ranked below Tennessee, but they make it in above Tennessee because of the stupid rules and the way that this thing is set up. That I think that stuff has to go away. The automatic qualifiers. Yeah. There are automatic qualifiers for the NCAA tournament. Everybody that wins their conference tournament, they make it in, yada, yada. That's how you get like the 14, 15, 16.
It's like 68 teams. So
exactly.
You have room. Somebody got to get beat in the first round.
In theory, that's a good thing. Because you can include a Boise State that's like fun. They gave Oregon a hard time earlier this season. I think they had like a lead in the third quarter against Oregon earlier this year. They ultimately lost, but still. And so now they get a chance, but ultimately, like there's a bunch of teams that are better than them and should just be in the playoff. Like that's just like an SMU. I look at SMU in the ACC. They're beating everybody's head in the ACC. SMU needs to be in front of all of them. Tennessee needs to be in front of all of them. That's stupid.
The whole thing is so, like, the further we get into this, the sillier it gets to me. Because you look at these rankings and you're arguing about Alabama and Ole Miss and Georgia and some of these 2-loss teams. Like they're all deserving. And you can poke holes in almost every single argument. I mean, Texas being at number 3, their best win. I mean, literally, what on the broadcast tonight, they showed one of their key wins is Arkansas.
Did they really?
Yeah, which is one of I've seen it referred to as a bad loss for Tennessee.
Yep. That's great. That's really great.
So, who is Texas beat to be deserving? Now, I think Texas is a good team, right? I think they are good. Most of these teams around them in the playoffs. So this isn't me saying like they're not good, they don't deserve it. It's just like, what, based on what though you're propping them up? And because Texas is up there, well, then Georgia's win against Texas looks better because they just say Texas is good. So Georgia's win must be excellent because they beat Texas. And that's not shade at Georgia by any means. Obviously, I think they're a playoff team as well and should be playing for a championship next month. But everything's like that. You want to talk about Tennessee's loss to Arkansas, and then Ole Miss has probably the worst loss of any team in the top 12, losing to Kentucky, who has their only SEC win, and it was in Oxford. That was a home loss to a really bad Kentucky team. I mean, one, that shows how tough it is to play in the SEC. But two, how does that stack up, against some of this other stuff? You're just running around in circles. I mean, and to me, the spirit of a tournament should be to get the best teams in, right? The best teams at the end of the season. I don't care who is playing the best football in September. And look, this doesn't really help Tennessee's case either. Like, this isn't me bending it to say what's best for Tennessee. I think the teams that are playing the best, and you've had to prove that throughout the season, those are the teams that should be in. They should be playing for a championship. Right now, I would not want to play South Carolina in the tournament, especially if they were like hosting a home game. They're playing really good. They're 7-3. They got screwed against LSU, so they should be 8-2. They could have easily beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I mean, that's a team that's not far away from being 9-1. To me, they're a playoff caliber team, but because their record is 7-3 and the way things went, they have no chance. They have no chance to get in. And it's not like I'm betting for South Carolina to be in, but that just shows you how flawed this whole deal is. And you're looking at these brackets, and you know that Ole Miss, Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, they would all kill Indiana, probably, and Boise State, and all these, and Miami.
Most likely.
And Miami's going to get a
Miami
bye.
for sure. Ugh.
Like, we all know this.
They're the most annoying team in the entire thing is Miami. No offense to Craig, our friend who writes for A to Z Sports. He's a Miami guy.
Yeah,
but
I like Miami.
They stink.
But you're right. It's so dumb. Like, we all know who the best teams are, but it doesn't matter. We've got to go off this weird criteria, and these are the schedules they played, and this is their record. So, SEC bias and all this stuff that you want to throw around. It's like, you know who the best teams are. We got to come up with a system that gets those teams in. And if it includes, that's why I say expand to 32, because you can bring those other teams in and we can prove it on the field, because that's the only way that you will ever settle any of these debates.
Yes, 100%. And those are obviously future considerations at this point. You just, it's going to take time to suss through exactly what has to happen with the playoff. It's much like Nico. It's getting its feet under it still. And it's just going to be a new product until it's not anymore. And hopefully in time, those things do get ironed out. We'll see. But as of now, it's 12 teams. That's what you're going to have to deal with. Tennessee is begrudgingly behind BYU and Boise State and whoever else you think they shouldn't be behind at this point. Those are the two that I would obviously point at. I think you could also, as you've been saying, Ole Miss, you beat Alabama. There's plenty of arguments there. But all things considered, I think we get him and haw about should Tennessee be in, should they not. I just want to look at the situation realistically right now, and with the rest of the time that we have, just talk about how does Tennessee get in.
It's not a terrible spot that they're in right now.
It's not, because and that's what I wanted to emphasize, because I think I've seen two camps break out in Tennessee fans. They're the ones that are complete doom and gloom. Oh, we lost because of that stupid Arkansas game. We're going to miss the playoff completely. There's no way we make it in. And everything's going to work out bad and we're done for. There's that. And then there's the people that are like, look, this is the situation that we're in. Go beat Vandy. Make sure you concentrate on Vandy and go beat them as well as you can, as comprehensively as you can, and look as good as you can. And you'll probably get in.
Beat this UTEP team. It's the same coach as Austin Peay last year, and we know how that went. And he's already talked to the media this week, and his whole spiel of we don't go to lose any game, we're going there to win. It's like, yeah, I believe you, buddy. I saw you. I don't care.
1-8 right now.
It'll be a frustrating game, I'm sure.
It's gonna be. Yeah.
Don't look past them to Vandy. Just please don't.
Yes, I'm not looking forward to it after the way that things went against Austin Peay. It makes me lean towards just play Gaston more, take Dylan Sampson out of the game. I don't friggin' know. Don't let anybody get hurt, whatever else. That game was so annoying. And, there's a ton ahead of you right now. If you can just move on, go beat Vandy, and then
that was the first game where it was like, oh, Hendon Hooker's not in town anymore. It's been that feeling since.
Exactly. So, I mean, but again, we're not going to give much airtime to UTEP. We'll predict our score for UTEP near the end here, as we do every game all during the season. But, for this, a few things have to happen for you. Well, not even a few things. It's really just kind of one thing. One domino has to fall. That's how close you are.
And there's several dominoes that could fall. That's a good thing.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the very first one is you got to go win out and beat Vandy, which with Diego Pavia and their whole deal, it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world. At the end of the day, it is still Vandy, and here's the facts on the ground. Is Vandy a much more formidable team than they've been in any recent year? Yes. Is it ever acceptable in any given season to lose to Vanderbilt ever for the rest of time? No, it's not, and it never will be. And no coach that has lost to Vanderbilt has ever survived here. So just case in point there. Don't lose to Vandy. But
not even Philip Fulmer.
Not even Phil. He couldn't even do it. Once he lost to Vandy, that's when everything started going downhill. Shout out to Jay Cutler there. The beginning of the end for Phil. But the point that I wanted to make is to not come on here and be a complete downer. Genuinely, there's a lot that could happen that could help you out here. I think the less likely stuff, Army beating Notre Dame, possible.
Yeah.
Would be hilarious.
Yes.
I don't think it's going to happen. It would be hilarious kind of on two levels. Because realistically speaking, if they beat Notre Dame, suddenly they're the group of 5 team that's in the playoff.
I don't play them in the playoff either.
No, you would not. Anybody running that triple option, it just makes you nervous. And so with Army there, they would become the group of 5 team that makes it in over Boise State, and Notre Dame would get knocked out. You're in. Florida could beat Ole Miss. You're in. That one would be fun too, because it would be Lane blowing another big game right after he won the biggest game of his career. Hilarious on a few levels there.
Shame that game's not in prime time in the Swamp. It's a noon game, so advantage Ole Miss a little on there. But Florida's playing well. I mean, credit to them too for kind of sticking with Napier. I think we'll see how it turns out. I'm still not sold on the guy, but he's righted the ship. So we'll see if that works out. That'd be nice. Big time Gator fan this weekend for the first time ever.
And then there's some more esoteric possibilities, like Texas A&M beats Texas, and Texas's resume is essentially nothing. They really have none. No. And then they get bounced. Indiana gets blown out so bad by Ohio State that they have no choice but to throw Indiana out. And when you think about it,
that's not unrealistic.
It's not. Tennessee lost to Georgia by 14 and dropped 4 spots. Indiana would have to drop 6 spots to get to Tennessee's position. And
what's Indiana's best win?
Oh, I looked this. This is funny. So I was just looking at this. Let me pull it back up. These are the top 6 teams in the Big Ten currently. Oregon, Indiana, then Ohio State, Penn State, Illinois, Minnesota. Out of all those that aren't Indiana, how many teams has Indiana played this season out of who I just read off?
They've played Illinois, I think.
Nope.
No? Have they played Minnesota?
Nope.
I'm guessing 0 then.
Absolutely none of them. They played Washington, who is the next team down. Let me check to make sure again, to make sure I'm not misspeaking there. No, I am correct that they have played none of them. None of the top, I guess, none of the top 7 that aren't themselves. I mean, it's an embarrassing. It's not their fault. They've been blowing out everybody, and they look like a pretty good team. But I have absolutely nobody. Michigan.
They made a big deal about them blowing out Nebraska. I'm like, Nebraska's sucked since they fired Bo Pelini. I don't.
Nebraska. Nebraska's 5-5, and they just lost to 4 games in a row to Indiana, Ohio State, UCLA, USC, and then they have Wisconsin to finish out the season to potentially make a bowl game. Oh no, sorry, Wisconsin and Iowa. It's pretty ridiculous with Indiana. And so what is that number that would boot them out of the playoff? It feels like maybe 21 plus, where you just go, okay, they're not in
Yeah.
this league, are they? They're just not up to snuff.
You want them to show like, okay, you played a playoff team here in Ohio State and you couldn't even hang with them. If that happens, you cannot keep them in at that point.
I don't think you can.
No.
Yeah. So there's that. Thinking beyond that, I mean, technically, like Texas could lose to Kentucky.
I mean, that wouldn't be totally shocking
out.
either. Kentucky plays hard. They're just
Yeah.
not that good. They don't have enough talent. I mean, they played Georgia close.
I don't know. Let's see. Oregon doesn't play this week, so there's no chance there. But I don't know who they finish the season with. But outside of that, it's Penn State. Here's another one. This is another one. Penn State could lose to Minnesota this week. Minnesota an 11-point underdog in that one, but it's at Minnesota. That's another one.
What's
they
Penn
lose,
State's
you're probably in.
Best win? Do you have that handy?
I do. Let's see.
And James Franklin's been known to drop some big games that he shouldn't drop.
So technically speaking, their only quote unquote ranked win is over current number 25 Illinois, who they beat 21-7 in State College in Pennsylvania. So, yeah, not a lot of legs to stand on for them either. And then, of course, a really wild one would be if Ohio State lost to Indiana, then Ohio State would be a 2-loss team. Does Ohio State fall all the way out? I doubt it. I doubt they would. That would really be
they probably should, but they won't.
Exactly. So I don't think that one helps you, but Ohio State losing to Michigan, maybe. I don't know. Is that game at Ohio State? I think it is. It is at Ohio State. So
I don't see that one
happening. No, but I will say, as far as that game goes, a lot of Tennessee fans have been talking about Ohio State, Indiana. Oh, go Ohio State, go blow them out. Should Ohio State blow Indiana out? 100% yes. Ohio State, pound for pound, has the best roster in college football. Like, I don't know if all SEC fans know that. I assume a lot of them probably do. They went out and they were the freaking Yankees of college football over the offseason. Like,
a couple guys Tennessee wanted they got.
Yes, they tried to get absolutely everybody they could, and Ryan Day stinks, in my personal opinion. He is a product of the rosters that he has. He is not a great coach, and they win despite him more than they win because of him. And so I think that's probably going to be a close game. I would say don't count on that one. Count on another domino falling. And then, I mean, obviously move on beyond that, forecast out even further. Like I said earlier, the championship games. It's easy for somebody to say, oh, they're not going to drop a 3-loss SEC team out of the playoff, right?
We have no idea.
Proof of that.
We have no idea how they're going to treat these conference championship games in this
total wild card
expanded play. Yeah, it's going to, and it, you know, our friend Craig that writes with us, he pointed out, and this is probably true, and I mean, you can't really deny it. It's like it's going to depend on the logo of the team that loses. You know, that's going to be a big part of it. And that's kind of the story of these rankings to some extent so far.
It definitely is. I mean, you for sure have brand bias. I think Texas is example A1A. Yeah. You take the preseason ranking of Texas and Texas's logo off of their resume, and they're probably in, but they're like 9-10 right now.
Yeah.
Something like that. I mean, they lost to Georgia by more than Tennessee did on their home field. They just don't have that second loss that Tennessee has. And they went to Arkansas and actually won. They got to play there during the day. Not that I'm bitter, but
that would have been preferable.
Yes, 100% for sure. And just freaking score 20 points. 20 points. I will never, if Tennessee does miss the playoff ultimately, not scoring 20 points at Arkansas in that game is going to make me want to vomit for the rest of eternity. That is just, ugh.
Austin said, what's Ohio State's motivation for blowing out Indiana? Well, I think you have to, because you can't just assume you're going to beat Michigan. You should beat Michigan, but if you lose that game to Michigan, but you've blown out Indiana, I think that would help, a 2-loss Ohio State solidify their spot.
I mean, how many have they lost to Michigan in a row? 4? You haven't beat Michigan in 4 years. Like, you can't.
Well, I mean, this isn't the same Michigan though, but yeah, you're right. I mean, who knows? That game is kind of one of those that
they almost beat Indiana.
Rivalries happen, and sometimes, it's just your night, and hopefully it'll be Michigan, or your afternoon if it's Big Ten. They love playing their marquee games at noon.
I mean, Michigan,
that game will be at noon.
Michigan nearly saved us from all of this a week ago.
I thought, oh man, I was hoping.
They were
and
driving.
That's another. It's like, well, Indiana won. It's like, well, Indiana's supposed to be, this undefeated team that y'all are propping up here in the top 5 or whatever. And Michigan's not. I mean, they've been pretty bad at times this season, and you barely started by them. If we're, giving Tennessee hell for beating Florida in overtime, and Florida's looking a little better than we thought they were, I don't know. Some of the reasoning with the committee's decisions it's just inconsistent. It's all over the place, and that's not just Tennessee centric. It's with all of it. There's several teams that are getting kind of the short end of the stick on that, because they're just not. They're not Alabama. They're not Ohio State, so they don't get the benefit of the doubt. I'm not saying those teams don't deserve the benefit of the doubt at times. Like, maybe they are that good, but why do you just assume in their case and not other teams' cases?
Monty in the comments, and I apologize. We haven't read a lot of comments tonight. I apologize. There's been a ton of comments, so apologies there. It's almost just been too many. We've had a ton to talk about. But he said the committee said they would not penalize a conference championship loser. I'm sure they said that in years past, and then literally last year they did it to Georgia. So I'll believe it when I see it. I'll put it that way. It's
so situational too. Like, if it's a bubble team that gets into the top 12, or is right there like 10 or 11 or somewhere close, and then they lose their conference championship game, I mean, they have to drop. It's a loss. Like, they have to drop at least a spot. I mean, that could drop somebody out, right? I mean, I don't know. I think you just have to see the situation. I think they're really hoping that a playoff caliber team does not lose a conference championship game, but it's going to happen in the SEC. So that's the one that you'll have to watch is who gets in. And at this point, I can't even know the SEC championship game scenarios at this point. I assume Tennessee probably can't get in. I know they can't go past Georgia.
Tennessee's essentially out of it. I think it would take Texas losing to Kentucky and Texas A&M and Alabama losing to Auburn.
Would Ole Miss have to lose as well, I assume?
Yes. So yeah, I mean, there's a ton that would have to go down, and the tiebreakers are so confusing. I mean,
this will be the scenario that happens: is Tennessee backs in somehow and then loses,
the SEC championship.
You would have been in if Florida wouldn't have lost to Ole Miss. Totally backfired.
That is what it'll be. The most improbable outcome gets Tennessee to the SEC championship game. They lose the SEC championship game and miss the playoff. That is really that would be the Tennesseeist. The Tennesseeist of all Tennessee outcomes. But yeah, I mean, Lucas brings up another one. Auburn could beat A&M and Alabama.
Would not be shocking.
And that, who knows? Auburn has lost like 10 one-score games all season. It's not actually 10, whatever it is. A bunch of one-score games this season. They're kind of right there. They're not really good, but they are right there.
If any of those games are at Auburn, and A&M is,
are they?
That's another one of those places. Are they both?
Let me check.
I mean, that's another one of those places where, I mean, we know strange things happen.
The A&M game is at Auburn, and the Alabama game is in Tuscaloosa. So that, I don't know if I see Auburn winning that one, but it's honestly weirder things have happened. Better Alabama teams have nearly lost to worse Auburn teams. So
I mean, South Carolina, which I do think South Carolina is pretty good. They have a really good pass rusher and some good players, great tight end. I mean, they almost won in Tuscaloosa earlier this season.
It's true. Not a notoriously like top notch environment. So I did want to see the Texas and Texas A&M game is at Texas A&M. And so
What time? Is there a time on it yet?
Let's see.
'Cause that could be a really tough place to play at times too.
7:30.
Yeah,
Watch out for that one. Watch out for that one.
That'd be an interesting one.
That's an agent of chaos lying in wait right there. Especially if Texas A&M loses to Auburn this week.
That would be odd because A&M has 2 losses, right?
They do, but one is the Notre Dame. It's not an SEC loss.
So, but how does that? I mean, if you beat Texas, though, I mean they're right back in the mix of who are they pushing out. I mean, it's
like I said, it's an agent of chaos, just like really hanging out there.
And like that's the thing is there's really no motivation for college football or ESPN. ESPN is going to drive much of this, right? There's really not a ton of motivation for them to expand this. I'm sure they will, but it maybe not like beyond 14 or 16 because they want to keep those conference championship games. ESPN, all the conferences, I'm sure, dudes, it's a moneymaker. ESPN specifically is going to want to keep the SEC championship game. And then look at how much chaos there is. You get these ranking shows that you get to debate for a month, and it's just all this chaos. And if you went to 32 teams, like there's not much debate, right? Like Tennessee's in. Like as long as they don't lose out, they're in. South Carolina's going to get in, even with 3 losses, and Georgia and Ole Miss. All these teams are automatically in. You're really just jockeying for seeding. It's not quite as important, even though I think it would be much better for the sport and our mental health through the month of November. I don't know if they'll ever get to that point. There's just no real motivation to do it. Unless like Georgia or Alabama or Ohio State, like they just can't put them in. In which case, then I think you might see like, maybe we should expand it.
I just think like for me, I'm going to be rooting with every ounce of my being for Army in Florida this weekend. Those are the two, because they not only would they get Tennessee into the playoff in a much more simple and clean fashion, but they would both be hilarious. Like that would be really funny outcomes for everyone involved, like getting to dunk on Notre Dame, Lane Kiffin blowing it again. It would just,
because I swear they've men in blacked that Northern Illinois loss. Like you just don't hear about it.
Oh yeah,
it's like it never happened.
Men in black is a great description for what is that. It is memory hold. I mean, it is gone off the face of the earth. You would not know what happened. I mean, and I saw a clip, Ward Emanuel in this session of him getting questioned, the chairman of the playoff committee,
the Michigan athletic director.
The Michigan athletic director, insane that he is the guy that leads that thing. I don't just
unbelievable. Michigan had like one of the biggest scandals in the sport of the last decade, or
just
whatever.
I don't know that it's overtly corrupt, but it's corrupt. Like that's a corrupt choice for that person. But regardless, I did see a clip of him saying, "Oh, we're not worried about things that happened a month or two ago. Right now, we're not thinking about that." Well, buddy, if we're not worried about that, then why did Tennessee play Alabama in October? Why did we play that game? Might as well just forfeit them all until November. And then, well, as long as these count, then hey, good.
There is no right answer, and that's the frustrating part, is that there is no consensus. There is no answer, that there is no logic that you can use, because it's just an endless loop of, well, this team lost to that team, but this team beat that team. I mean, you've seen it with the SEC all season. Like they've all beat each other, and you've got to somehow sift through that and be like, well, you lost Arkansas, and we don't think they're very good. So that's a worse loss than losing to Kentucky or losing to Vanderbilt or Northern Illinois or whatever. It's just it's silly in a lot of ways.
It is. And the bottom line to me, we could talk till we're blue in the face. I mean, Andrew brings up another one here in the comments. Alabama has to go to Oklahoma this week. Oklahoma's having a stinker of a season, but he said it's their first game back healthy. I don't know who all is back healthy there, but per se, it's like
everyone they lost in the Tennessee game.
Yeah, they're all the wide receivers. Jackson Arnold has been playing a little bit better now that he's back in the driver's seat there. You never know, but the bottom line to me is, as of right now, if you ask me whether or not Tennessee makes it into the playoff, I say they do. I think if you honestly, you got to handle business, beat Vanderbilt. but I think they do.
I think so too, because you really only need like one thing to happen, and there's so
out of
many
a
different
ton of
that-
things.
yeah, so
Yeah.
the
So-
way this season has gone, you would expect. Austin Stanley likes to remind us that one top 10 team has lost like every week or the last however many weeks, pretty consistently. So it was Tennessee this past week, unfortunately,
and BYU. BYU.
Yeah, so history suggests that some wild stuff is going to happen over these last 2 weeks. Hopefully, it happens this week, so we can rest a little easy going into that last week and just focus on beating Vanderbilt.
It would be nice if you just knocked one out this week and you didn't have to worry about it. So we'll see what happens. Let's finish with this. Tennessee plays UTEP. Let's give some quick score predictions on the way out. Zach, here it is. UTEP is 2-8. They have played one Power 5 team all season. That is Nebraska in their opening game, and they lost 40-7. Last week, they played Kennesaw State, who is widely considered the worst team in all of FBS. They joined FBS, I believe, this year. They played Kennesaw State last week. They did win in overtime, 43-35. So I think you are playing one of the worst teams in all of FBS football. At the same time, this team has a psycho coach who pulled a bunch of nonsense against you last year.
Yes.
He was coaching an FCS team last year, or when it was last year.
Yeah, it was early last year. It was after the Virginia game, I think.
That's right. And he just did all this weird, goofy, like.
It looked like he was on amphetamines. Let's just be clear.
Yes. He's jumping around, going crazy on the sidelines. So, Lord knows what could happen. Dispose of these guys quickly, early, often. Just what's your prediction, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a pest, but at least you do have that Austin P game film. I think he's got like 11 or 12 players he brought with him from Austin P that played in that game last season too.
Right.
So I fully expect it to be these pretty much the same game plan, right? Like, I don't think there's too many different ways that he can game plan that give Tennessee hell. It's probably going to be something similar. Probably, honestly, and we may never know the answer to this, Austin P might have given other better teams the blueprint to stopping Tennessee, just since that game, really, is when we've seen many of the offensive struggles for Tennessee. But I still think they handle business. I don't know. I don't think they're going to score 70-some points like they did against Kent State earlier this year. But I think it'll be one of those games where it's like, oh, maybe Tennessee's figured it out offensively. I think they'll win something like 45-7.
Yeah, I think it'll be something along those lines. I would bet they take Nico out early. Dylan Sampson plays a half at most, if all goes correctly. In the first half, I would go 47-3. Something along. Does that math work out?
No.
What would you have to do 47? Yeah, it doesn't. What'd you say? 45-3.
Yeah, that's 6 touchdowns and a field goal.
I mean, doable. I'll stick with that.
You throw a safety in there. That's actually not. I think that's in play.
You never know.
Yeah. So
I'll stand by it.
Yeah,
Weird.
Right.
It might be scoregami. It might be one.
Yeah, there we go.
Off the wall, off the wall score there. So there it is. Charlie Burris, Zach Reagan. Everybody say your prayers. Root for Army. Root for Florida as much as, you never want to root for Florida, but I think we have to. I think this is it's out of our hands now. It's in God's hands. But thank you to everybody who's watching. Apologies again. We didn't get to as many comments. There was just so much to talk about. Usually like to get more comments in than we did tonight. But hey, ton of fun regardless. We could not do this show without you. It was a huge audience tonight. We really appreciate it. I think that's it. You know where to find us. Subscribe, do all that stuff, yada, yada, yada. That's it. And we will talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.